2020 was such a weird year. It gave myself, as well as many other people, a chance to develop a lot of new hobbies considering we kind of had no choice, especially hobbies involving escapism. And one of those escapist hobbies involves reading books. Reading's been one of those things that I've enjoyed since I've been young, having read countless Goosebumps books and many other series, and I've fallen out over the years, as I imagine a lot of us have. It's such an underrated pastime that I really wish a lot more people would invest their time into. So today I made an effort to make a list of the 6 books that got me through last year, and I'm going to give a reason why I recommend these 6 books, because they did get me through 2020. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting off at number 6. Might be a surprise to some that I'm a Batman fan. Shocker, I know. So I'm going to start it off with The Killing Joke, a novel adaptation of the 1988 graphic novel masterpiece of the same name. This was written in 2019 by Krista Faust and Gary Phillips. The Killing Joke is an incredible story that really binds the Batman and the Joker together, as they should be, and showcases that they are just two sides of the same damaged coin and are also soulmates who can't live without each other. This storyline is dubbed one of the darkest Batman stories of all time, and this was the darkest story that they had at the time of release. Joker escapes from the asylum yet again before Batman attempts to genuinely help him once and for all to end their never-ending cycle of insanity before one of them ends up killing the other one. Joker's plan this time around was to prove a point. He wanted to prove that he could take the sanest and most sensible person and drive them to insanity, all with the help of one bad day. Very much like what happened to himself, as the book gives the bold and definitive origin to the clown prince of crime, bringing him back to the days of being a failed comedian. And this was something that was never done before the 88 original, and one that keeps getting looked back on in modern incarnations. With the graphic novel ending in speculation if the Batman really did kill the Joker, with the Joker ultimately getting what he wanted since Batman did break his golden rule, this novel gives us an answer, goes beyond that, and gives us a little origin of Barbara Gordon transitioning from Batgirl to Oracle. My only issue with this book is too much subplot that doesn't consist of what we all go back to The Killing Joke for, the holy union of Mr. J and Batsy, but it's also an Oracle origin as it familiarizes us with her character pretty well, so I respect. Number 5. The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. Before the catastrophe that the Hellraiser series turned out to be, minus the first 3 films, there was this book that the first film was based on. It tells us a story of Frank Cotton, a selfish man who travels the world bored of life, trying to search for the next best thing since he thinks that he's had it all, only to discover the promising Le Marchand's box. Bro, I can't say that word, please excuse me. Said to lead you to a realm of exponential pleasures, only later to find out that maybe the boring life that he was so bored of maybe wasn't so bad and boring after all. After the box is open, he's introduced to the Cenobites, except the Pinhead that we all know leading the pack is replaced by the Engineer, a leader who isn't as quite as iconic or epic, but definitely serves well for the intended purpose. After Frank is damned to an eternity of torment, since these beings have no differentiation between pain and pleasure, his brother Rory, his brother's wife Julia, whom Frank shared an intense affair with back in his better days, and Kirsty are subjected to unspeakable terrors as Frank breaks the seal of hell and tries so subtly to send messages for help. One of the main things I always find amusing from this story is that it really shows how far someone can really go strictly out of lust and overall selfishness, because Julia did some truly sus shit just to get with this greedy flesh shoot again so she can pull up to that dick appointment on time. Ugh, yuck. This adaptation gives us a lot more backstory on Julia and Frank's relationship before the hell, as well as helps us understand Frank more, which the movie failed to utilize, considering Frank caused all of this. The Hellbound Heart is an extremely short read and has grade 3 size font, so this can get finished in an afternoon. A perfect read if you're a fan of the series and want to understand the lore a bit more. Number 4. George Orwell's Animal Farm. I think most people are familiar with this book, but that isn't going to stop me from recommending to read it. And if you have read it, read it again. Orwell always has such an interesting take on political issues and the struggles of the working class, as he draws inspiration from real-life situations in his time, as well as his own first-hand experiences as he applies them into his work. This book is a satire for what happened in the Russian Revolution and follows the story of a farm of animals run by an asshole farmer. One day, the animals finally get sick of his shit, kick him out in an epic battle of animals versus farmers, and take control of the farm to fully self-sustain themselves. Life is all great, as one would expect from such an environment, but after a while, the group of pigs who call the shots on Animal Farm start getting greedy as their newfound sense of power corrupts them and slowly transforms them into the things that they really despised before. They started off with a saying of, all animals are equal, and by the end of the novel, it was changed to all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others, as the pigs in power effectively deliver propaganda in unique ways, spread lies, manipulate, and they ultimately rewrite history as they are all self-absorbed totalitarian dictators. There's a lot of big words in this video. A couple of things really stuck with me in this book. 1. The donkey always has these short, cryptic opinions on the revolution and is always like, I'm old, I've been around, I've seen some things, hee-haw! And to me, I see that as, hey man, I've been around this revolution block a few times before, and one thing I noticed is that revolution is like a revolving door, as it keeps repeating itself as we keep ending up in square one as the years go by. Must be called why it's a revolution, you see. Something to take into mind is everyone this past year is wanting revolution and change, so this book hits pretty close to home. Another thing that stuck with me was in the final pages, it is said that the animals are now failing to see the difference between the humans and the pigs as they sit around the table, like they are just one and the same, and it's honestly so true, and I always think of this whenever I see Doug Ford, because there's no denying this man could play Snowball in a live-action adaptation. Number 3, Pet Sematary. Dude, this book is so dismal and depressing, and that's why I love it. If you love the original movie and hate the remake that wasn't so bad but scrapped a lot of this material out the semi-truck window, then please read this. There's so much more thickness to the story than what they showed us in the movies, as one would expect from a novel that a movie was based off. I love the inclusion and the understanding of the supernatural driving force between why these dead things be living fierce. I love the inclusion of more Victor Pascal, and I also love the real relationship between Lewis and Judd with the meaningful interactions that they frequently have. And man, do I just love Judd. Since Lewis's dad passed away when Lewis was at an early age, he sees Judd as almost like a father figure to him. It adds a lot more meaning to his character, so when that one part happens, you can't help but feel the weight of it all and can't help but get caught up in the feels, which this book never falls short on. Also, I want to add in there, I love everything about Dead Church. He's definitely my favorite character because of how awkwardly useless and gross he always is, while Lewis just puts up with him anyways. Just be prepared for Stephen King to be Stephen King and overly and excessively elaborate on things that really don't need to be. Number 2. To say that I'm a Batman fan is a complete understatement. That's why I had to go off and read The Quarter Vows written by Greg Cox that was published in 2019 as part of a 3-piece alongside The Killing Joke and also Mad Love, which is a Harley Quinn origin. This was the first Batman novel I actually read that started my downward spiral into other Batman novels, as well as the first book that I read last year. The novel is an original story, not a comic book translation, as it features the Court of Owls, a secret society that has infested Gotham for thousands of years. There's been a series of brutal murders going about in the greatest city on Earth, and all that's left on the scene of the crime are burnt up bodies with little to no explanation of what the hell. Through his great detective work, since that is showcased in this novel, it has shown these kinds of murders resurface every so often and have been for the last century, as the origins tie into a scientist named Percy Wright. That is when this novel takes a turn into 2 timelines, which I really enjoyed. The second timeline dates back to the early 1900s, as Percy Wright has been working on an elixir that grants him visions into the future. Him and his wife, who he has a rough relationship with to say the least, are part of the Court of Owls. Percy's loyal wife sells him out to the court on what he is working on and is now forced to perfect the elixir for him, while at the same time he's having an affair with a woman that he's madly in love with, and takes it so far as to make sculptures of her for the city, since he does that, and very well from the sounds of it. Hashtag what isn't Percy good at? To perfect his magic potion, Percy has to test them on humans under the court's orders, and through that, these people end up burning up from the inside out as a light side effect. Needless to say, the owls got hold on this elixir, and throughout the years, since they are forever, they try to perfect it as it's only been done once before, as the next 100 years of Gotham were truthfully and eerily predicted. What I love most about this story is how much it can correlate with our own society, considering the Court of Owls are the Freemasons of the Batman universe, and the fact that so many things have been predicted by the media throughout the years and essentially have been hidden right under our noses hits pretty close to the words told by Greg Cox up in Gotham City. 10 out of 10, much recommend. And that brings us down to number 1. So, the book that got me through 2020, funny enough, was George Orwell's 1984. This is the book that introduced me to George Orwell and made me greatly respect him and his work. I'm not going to spoil anything that happens because I honestly want everyone to go and read it, but I just want to give a little overview. So, published in 1949, this was Orwell's last book he wrote, and by far his best, most talked about, and possibly most controversial. Possibly is an understatement when it comes to that. When I first looked into this book last year, it was number 17 trending on the site that I was on, and I know recently it's been trending as well, so it's as relevant today than it was back when it was published, if not more relevant, and I can see why. It's about Winston Smith, your everyman living on a dystopian Earth that is eerily alike while very much different from our own in the year 1984, where everywhere is completely taken over by a strict totalitarian government. And strict is an understatement. Cameras monitor you everywhere, every second. Microphones are listening in case you break their strict laws at any instance. Propaganda is spewed and lies are spread every day, but no one can prove these lies even exist, all because the government just says they don't. And if you disagree, you get vaporized by the thought police and have your existence completely erased like you were never even there in the first place. Children are more loyal to the government than their own families since they're easy to manipulate and will out their own parents with no remorse for the many crimes that the government has laid out. They also effectively rewrite history to their liking and will rewrite history at any instance they choose to solely push whatever narrative they want to push, and the people just eat it up because they are completely unable to think for themselves, let alone have an original thought, with the constant propaganda and fake news being spewed, which basically gives you a sensory overload at all times. They've essentially been beaten into submission, completely loyal to Big Brother. With how last year went and how everything's been going in the last forever how long, it's extremely easy to draw parallels from this story, as the world that Orwell paints eerily coincides with our own in the way that it is heading. Though at the time this was how he viewed Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany, he kind of fused the two and came out with this. It definitely makes you always want to question the ones in power, because power is never innocent, and once power and control is established, what's the point of taking it back once you can see what it can do? Really makes you think. And the best and most well-written literature will provoke thought. The book is split into 3 equally as compelling parts and does an extremely good job at explaining the motives that makes you hope this story doesn't inspire the corrupt minds of the world, if it already hasn't. Reading is such an interesting thing. Like, you have all these pages of paper that you just like zone out on and just essentially hallucinate for hours. How isn't that the coolest thing? The way that I recommend getting through a pandemic in terms of reading would be a healthy dose of superheroes, dystopians, and also horror, but highly emphasis on the dystopians. So with all that being said, there's the 6 books that got me through 2020. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to give it a like, give it a subscribe, and I'll see you next time. My name's Freddy Savage. Hope you have a good night. Peace. Oh, don't forget, go out and read, nerds.